Steelers release Preston Smith. Also, does Russ have the best support possible when it comes to his chances of being back in the Steel City for 2025? All that and more. Big Deep News. It was a busy Friday for the Steelers. Let's start with the team releasing edge rusher Preston Smith. This was a no-brainer move, probably the least surprising move that we're going to see this offseason, because he was going to count for $13.4 million against the cap in 2025, and then also $14.1 million against the cap in 2026. And given the production that we got out of Preston Smith, this was an absolute no-brainer. I mean, even we knew this was coming for the most part after we traded for him at the trade deadline. Because once you saw those cap hit numbers and also the fact that there would be no ramifications for cutting him, there was going to be no dead cap, this was always going to be the most likely scenarios. He was just going to be a half of a season rental for us unless he completely balled out those last 8 games and went for like 10 sacks. Then, yeah, I'm sure we would have kept him on the roster. Or even I could have seen a scenario, didn't have to be 10 sacks, but if he really carved out a role as this depth guy and performed and got a few sacks for us, maybe 4 or 5 sacks, maybe we could have extended him and got that cap hit number down to like $5 or $6 million, and it would have been worthwhile to keep him around. Although even $5-6 million is a stretch for a depth outside linebacker. There's not much he could have done outside of literally getting like 10 sacks and completely balling out for the last half of the season, for this not to be the scenario. But that's that. In terms of what cap space we have now, reportedly it's $54 million, which is top 8 in the NFL. I like that, and I even saw a tweet from Steelers Depot that we could gain more cap space if we were to cut some additional players. Right here, instant roughly $30 million in cap space freed come March after displacement. If cut, Preston Smith, obviously that $13.4 million off the books, but then the difference is that's about $17.5 million if you cut Ogunjobi, Holcomb, Patterson, Dean Lowry. I'd say at least 3 out of those 4 would be getting released, right? Cole Holcomb at $6 million is interesting because it's like, what do we do with Landon Roberts? If we bring back Landon Roberts, I think we're definitely cutting Cole Holcomb. But if we don't, is it worthwhile to see what Holcomb can do or keep him around to be that potential third inside linebacker, compete with Peyton Wilson to be the 2 across from Queen? See what he looks like a year removed from this injury. Yeah, I think it all depends on what happens with Landon Roberts with that. But right there, if we cut all 4 of those guys from Ogunjobi, Holcomb, Patterson, Lowry, that's another 17. And then if we wanted, there's restructures to be had. We haven't been restructuring guys like that crazy in recent years. So I think there's still a TJ restructure you could do. Maybe a Cam, a Minka, a Boswell. Yeah, those are some names off the top of my mind. That could probably free up another between 10 or 20 million. So Steelers could do some serious work this offseason. We can afford T. Higgins. We can definitely afford T. Higgins. We can afford, there's some rumblings about us trying to get Milton Williams, one of the key guys for the Eagles on that interior defensive line. Yeah, maybe we could pay him like $20 million. You get a T. Higgins, a Javon Hargrave returned. I think that would be cheaper than getting a Milton Williams because he's a little bit up there in age. He's coming off of that tricep injury. 49ers are definitely going to cut him, though. So we could solve our defensive tackle issues, our wide receiver issues in free agency with like a snap of a finger. We get T. Higgins. We can get a Milton Williams. We could probably get a Javon Hargrave. We're going to have the cap space. That's not even that far of a that's not even far of a stretch to say we could sign T. Higgins and we could sign a solid interior defensive tackle. What? And again, if you wanted to bring back Landon Roberts, if you wanted to keep Cole Holcomb around, that could be your third inside linebacker guy competing with Peyton Wilson. Dante Jackson. Yeah, we're probably going to have to look at cornerback too. Dante Jackson, I think he could come back for something less than 10. Like, that's all within the available cap space. But then we also got to talk quarterback too, which is, again, why bringing back Justin Fields makes so much sense, because you can make all these other moves to build out the roster, adding a receiver, defensive tackle, cornerback. You could do all that stuff while also having Justin Fields here on a $10 to $15 million style contract. And he's got the upside, proven that he could win you games last year. You went 4-2, so it's not that big of a risk. I don't think if we start Justin Fields this year, we're all of a sudden going to go 5-12 or 6-11. And would that be the worst thing in the world, given the state of the franchise, to have that sort of wake-up call where we're drafting in the top 10 and a presumed big-time quarterback class in 2026? That wouldn't be the worst thing. I'm not calling for it. I'm not rooting for us to lose games, but I think we're just in this ball-don't-last scenario where we got to take some chances, we got to take some risks, try to change things up, and if it works, awesome. Like, I think our team's in a much better spot. If Fields looks like a franchise quarterback, if some of these potential free agent moves work out, our draft works out, good. We're probably in a way better spot than where we were last year and where we've been the last 2 or 3 years. But then if it doesn't work out, then you have your definitive answer. It's like officially time to shake things up even more, get a quarterback in the 2026 draft, maybe start looking into trading some of the veterans. That's when you're really looking at the rebuild. So let's see. I mean, as I said, this free agency period, this offseason should be good. It should be a good time. I still don't think it's going to be as crazy as last year, but with the cap space we have and the moves that can be made, watch out. We know Omar Khan ain't afraid of making some of these moves. But last thing, and this is probably the hottest topic for today's show. This is probably the most important thing to be discussing because it is related to the Steelers quarterback position. Bro, we're getting hints. We are getting some reports from big-name journalists associated with the Steelers that point to Rooney wanting Russ over Justin Fields. It's not necessarily a Tomlin thing. And most of us would think if Russ was back, it would be Tomlin's decision because of how he handled Fields, Russ 6 weeks into the season when they were both healthy. Tomlin went with Russ, and he said that's why I'm well compensated, right? Like this was a Mike Tomlin decision. A lot of reports were out there. He was lone wolf in making that decision too. So you would think if we go back to Russ in 2025, that would be a Tomlin decision too. Like Tomlin has an affinity for Russ, all that. Former Super Bowl champion. Tomlin respects what Russ has done throughout his career. But it's looking like if Russ is back, it would be more of a Rooney thing than a Tomlin thing. So let's look at what Kaboli had to say when visiting 93.7 The Fan. The people at the top of the organization that might make the ultimate decisions are number 3 fans over number 2 fans, referring to Wilson's number 3 jersey over number 2. I heard that maybe Art is more in favor of Russ than maybe the rest. Now, who has the last call on this? I don't know. I don't think Art would stick his nose in and say we are taking Russ and forget about it. But I think they made it crystal clear, at least Art did to me, and I do believe him on this one. They want to bring one of them back, and I think it's going to depend on which option they have. So that's one side of things with Kaboli, but then it gets even more interesting when you listen to Jerry Dulac from his chat script last week. Dan Vogelbach says, Jay Glazer said Russ will not be returning to the Steelers. Didn't present it as an opinion, said it was like a fact. Given his relationship with Mike Tomlin, shouldn't we assume he's getting that information from the head coach? Jerry Dulac says, pretty good assumption, Dan. But there may be others in the organization who don't agree with Mike Tomlin. Man, like I said, I'm surprised. I would have guessed it would have been the opposite. I would have guessed Tomlin was the one pushing for Russ, and maybe Rooney would be the one that would be more willing to see what like the young guy could do if he could eventually be the franchise quarterback for you. But yeah, I guess maybe Tomlin's more good with moving off of Russ and seeing Fields, because you keep hearing Tomlin talk about quarterback mobility, right? And obviously Fields has that over Russ. It's not even a question. But I also do think Tomlin values the veteran presence, the leadership, all that stuff that Russ brings to the table, which is why he made that decision to go with Russ. But after seeing how the season finished, maybe Tomlin's thinking to himself, that's only going to get us so far because Russ is limited in other areas, and our offense is going to be perpetually limited with Russ being our quarterback going forward. We're not going to be able to get over the hump. Let's give Justin Fields that chance. But this isn't, in terms of there being different opinions on Russ versus Fields for 2025, this isn't any different than what we've been hearing. I think there's internal dialogues, there's a struggle, there's a back and forth between a lot of players that have say in this decision. I'm surprised that who has their certain takes or certain opinions on it. I thought it would have been the opposite. I thought Tomlin would be the one still pushing for Russ. But I think that's it for today's show. Let me know your thoughts on topics discussed, Preston Smith released, and Rooney maybe preferring Russ over Fields. And that might have some impact on the quarterback decision for next year. But let me know your thoughts again. Stay chilling. Have a great, safe rest of the weekend. Peace.